Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a priest! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as Forty20. Joining me to break down another week of the NRL that was, are my good mates, Sixties and Clint. Fellas, Eels stole the win, it feels like, on probably different fronts depending on whose colours you're wearing. I think it was a good comeback from Parramatta. Other fans might disagree, but how are we doing this week as we gear up for a trip up to Brisbane for the NRL and NRLW?
Well, first of all, it was a win. And ultimately, you say to yourself after a game, which dressing room do you think the players would rather be in? I think that's a straightforward answer. It wasn't the manner of the win wasn't ideal for the Eels, but they got the 2 points. And right now, that's all I really care about. So I'm in a relatively good mood in terms of as far as Parramatta's concerned. However, we've got some things that we're going to talk about where I'm probably going to fire up. So I give fair warning, mate.
And Clint, I don't know how you're going to follow that one up, mate, but how are you holding together?
Yeah, look, I'm not too bad, but gents, I'm still hanging about and waiting for Graham Annesley's presser from post round 3, where he acknowledges the incorrectly called forward pass for the Regan Campbell-Gillard no try against Manly that denied us a win. You know, seeing as though this is a topical thing and we're all talking and pointing the finger at Graham Annesley said in terms of how results should or shouldn't have gone. Yeah, I'm probably not too dissimilar to Sixties. I'm a little bit fired up, and we'll probably hear a bit more of that as we get into this pod.
And before we get into stoking the flames of our controversy and, I suppose, robust discussion, a quick shout out to the sponsors of the Tip Sheet. As always, Big Swing Golf, North Mead, and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta, helping us pump out these episodes each and every week. All right, fellas, I'm going to put the signal out now.
News team, assemble!
Well, fellas, just before we get into the big NRL news and the big Eels news, a bit of sad information to pass on to our listeners is the passing of Michael Collins. Michael was Eels player number 383. He will forever be in Parramatta Eels club folklore because he was brought into the team for the Tooth Cup final in 1980 because Michael Cronin, believe it or not, had been suspended for that match and they needed a goal kicker. It was an astute replacement because the Eels won 8 points to 5 against the Tigers to take out the title, and it was apart from a pre-season competition win earlier in the 70s, this was Parramatta's first senior title that they took out with the Midweek Cup, as it was then called the Tooth Cup. And Michael kicked 4 goals to register every one of Parramatta's points that night, the 8 points. Michael only played 3 first-grade games with the Eels, but he's certainly one that will stay in the history books for Parramatta. It was sad to hear of his passing only earlier today that we heard about that. I think it was only overnight. It's quite topical considering that we just had the BGA annual Eels reunion, and to hear about a former Eel who holds a place in the Eels history books passing away was a bit of sad news indeed. And of course, we extend our sympathies and all of our thoughts from the Cumberland's Road to the family and friends of Michael Collins. So at this sad time, we are thinking of you. Fellas, I also just touched on the Blue and Gold Alliance Eels player reunion that took place over the weekend. It was a big event, 40, as you and I can testify. because it was held across the entire weekend. It kicked off with the luncheon on Saturday at Parramatta Leagues Club in Jack's Bar and Grill. That's our regular haunt on match days. And thanks, of course, to the Eels and also to Parramatta Leagues for their funding and sponsorship, respectively, of the Blue and Gold Alliance and the fantastic work they do as a not-for-profit organisation, assisting and connecting former Eels players and staff. It then rolled into Sunday with the brunch in Eels Lane at Parramatta Leagues Club, and there are a few more players, former players there on that day, and they enjoyed a bit of a feed and a drink and a catch up before they headed over to Combank Stadium. And as supporters at the match would remember, they did their lap of honour before the Eels match against the Dragons. So it was a big weekend for them. A big weekend for you, John, in your role in the reunion, taking the official photos on the day. And we're also fortunate that a number of players came over and spent a bit of time to have a bit of a chat with me, and we recorded those so that our listeners can have a bit of a listen to some players from yesteryear, talk about the reunion, and also a few memories from the past for them. So a big weekend. How did you recover from such a weekend, John?
I got to say, I was quite exhausted at the conclusion of Sunday afternoon. It had been a go sort of Saturday and Sunday. Not complaining though, because you're in rarefied company, and it's really really special to be a part of something like the BGA reunion luncheon. So certainly no complaints, like I said. But yeah, fantastic weekend. The BGA is such a wonderful initiative. Everyone involved there, it's like they're just so pure. Like they're so well intentioned, such great people. Championing such a fantastic cause. To reconnect all of the people that make the rich tapestry of the Parramatta Eels, and ensure that they can catch up and be better for it. So, very consider myself and both you and myself are very lucky to be part of it, and always fantastic to be there or any of the other events. So to have that happen and then back that into a not necessarily beautiful, but a needed victory in the NRL was a pretty good weekend.
Yeah, and just a shout out again to Billy Richards of the Blue and Gold Alliance and his committee, because those sorts of big events, and especially a weekend event, don't just happen because they were coordinating in not just those days, but the accommodation around it for the players who were travelling from interstate or from some distance to be able to stay overnight if they wish to on either the Friday, Saturday, or Sunday nights. I know there are a few sore heads after Saturday because some of the boys kicked on to establishments away from the Leagues Club after finishing an extended lunch at the club on Saturday. So, yeah, there are a few that were a bit dusty on Sunday morning. They put their hand up that they were a bit dusty, but look, it was terrific. And as I said, the work that the committee does to get that done, and I know he doesn't like to have us say his name, but our mate Jeff did plenty of work around that as well. Mel Brazel from the Eels, she was an absolute legend as well for getting it coordinated from the club's perspective as well, and everyone on that committee. I had the pleasure of sitting in on a meeting in the lead up to their reunion, just to finalise our part that we were doing in the weekend. And look, as I said, the amount of time, and the fact is that these people are volunteering in this not for profit organisation in that important job of keeping people connected, because that's what it's all about. The first step in being able to help people or assist people if they need it is to stay connected and find out who needs it. It might not be them, it might be someone else that they know, and then when they keep this as these connections grow, it makes it even more important. And next year they're aiming for a big Back to Parramatta Day where they get everyone who's been involved with Parramatta at a graded level back on the one day. Now, I'm not sure where they're going to end up hosting them because that would be some sort of occasion, but it's their goal for next year and they're already working on it. So we wish them well with that. But one thing before we move on, people can help and get involved with this because there's some great supporter merchandise available through the BGA. If you go to their website, which is www.theblueandgoldalliance.com.au, and go to the store, and they've got merchandise. John, you were wearing one of their supporter jackets. It's a pretty good-looking jacket, as you would no doubt attest to, and it's and they've got great polos, shorts, hoodies. They've got an Eels bag. They've got the bucket hats. So all of that's available, and if people purchase that, that helps contribute to the fundraising that they do, and also any potential sponsors out there who are interested in associating with this great organisation and who does such great work for former Eels players and staff. So just get in touch with the Blue and Gold Alliance. Billy Richards would love to hear from you, and it would be a great thing that you can do if you're either purchasing merchandise or looking to sponsor them. So, fellas, I think it's about time now that, John, you hit that stinger.
You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
Fellas, where do we begin now when talking about Sunday's results, Sunday's match? And I don't know whether to begin with what actually transpired out on the field or Graham Annesley's reaction to it, because, I mean, they're both as bad as one another. Explain to me in what world that tackle from Clint Gutherson could be adjudged as an intentional strip, one-on-one strip, which then entitled the Dragons to pick up the ball and score a try. I mean, I look at that and I go, okay, because Annesley, in his press thing today, showed just still framed where Gutherson's hand ended up near the ball and said, have a look at his raking motion there. Well, Graham Annesley, have a look at the start of that tackle where Clint Gutherson is up around the shoulder. His head's tucked behind the back of the player. He's not looking at the ball. He is not even looking at the ball. He's attempting to make a tackle, and then in attempting to make the tackle, his hand slides down the arm. Now, yeah, it ended up a great result because it made contact with the ball and out it came. But I'll tell you one thing. He was making a tackle, and every time the judgments are made on these tackles, it's all about what the players are looking at, whether they're actually in the act of making a tackle. He's trying to tell us that Clint Gutherson wasn't in the act of making a tackle, or that he changed his mind partway through. You play that at normal speed and try and determine whether
last line of defense fullback diving at full stretch, like you said, his head's on the blind side of a tackle. He makes no attempt to try and regrip and find the football. He's literally falling down because he's diving full stretch, and the hand gets to the first thing it gets purchase on, and it's the ball. So if we're honest to God calling that an intentional strip, then we need to change the rules in the game that anytime there is a hand on the football and it comes out, regardless of ball security responsibilities, it's a strip.
No, I tell you the change that we need to make, John and Clint, the change we need to make is that reaffirmed. It just confirmed that Graham Annesley is not the person that should be in that job. Because if he's issuing a directive to referees that they got that wrong, that'll do me. I mean, there's question marks over his decisions, over referees' decisions all season. I feel sorry for the referees because what the hell are they supposed to be doing how would they know whether they're Arthur or Martha when they get directives like that from the bloke heading it up? I mean, that was a disgraceful statement to make today, a disgraceful explanation of why the refs got it wrong. The refs actually got it 100% right, and this bloke is telling them that they got it wrong. It's an absurdity, fella. It is a complete absurdity, and he has stamped his name as someone that just should not be in that position anymore. I mean, he's probably stamped it many times this year, but you know what? The trouble is he's going to remain in that job. And we've got plenty of other things to take issue with. Clint, do you want to add anything to it, or am I just losing the plot here?
No, not at all. What I do want to add is I'm sick and tired of there being interpretations, and it's slowly crept in over probably the better part of the last half a decade to decade of rule interpretations that is favouring poor ball security. If they deserve to score a try there, let's be honest, Jacob Liddle in that scenario was very well placed to assist in scoring a try or even potentially scoring himself, and he bundled it. And we want to say, oh yeah, but he's the aggrieved because there was an attempted strip. And you gents have already touched on how it wasn't a strip. We just seem to be focusing as a game, or at least in the football office at NRL head office, of rewarding players for poor ball security. We're micro-analyzing every frame of play. And the fact of the matter is the players just aren't securing the ball well, and they shouldn't be rewarded for that, let alone a motherhood statement made after the game. And what to extend on that point that you mentioned about the referees, geez, it must be undermining for a referee. Could you imagine an employer in any other industry consistently, weekly going, well, this is where my employees got it wrong, and going out there to placate whether it's the media or the fans, and again, empty statements, because okay, let's entertain the argument from the other side of the coin for half a second and say that okay, maybe he was right. Well, even if he was, that doesn't change anything for the Dragons fans. We've been on the end of it ourselves earlier this year. I made a joke earlier about Regan Campbell-Gill, and that wasn't even that forward pass ruling or non-forward pass ruling wasn't even cited in his presser. It's all a bit farcical. I'm getting sick and tired of the weekly press conferences, and rather than coming out and saying, "Oh, this is what we, this was the wrong call, this was the wrong interpretation," we are all crying out for just consistency in that interpretation, because the fans will lay off once they know what the rules of engagement are. The problem is the rules of engagement shift not even every week, from every game day to day across the weekend, and that's why we're fed up and we can't keep up. It's an absolute lottery every call, and the game itself is becoming more and more about luck, really, than any other determining factor, and that's what's frustrating everyone, because we all want to sing from the same hymn sheet, and we just do not have the opportunity to at the moment.
Clint, the other area where it's a lottery is what Graham Annesley decides to talk about in these presses, because there are a myriad of things that they will admit to clubs that were incorrect decisions. Right? There will be, half a dozen or more things that happen in a game where the feedback, when the clubs go through their appropriate channels and they submit their reports to the NRL, and the NRL get back to them about their reports, they will admit to decisions that were made that were incorrect. And Parramatta's had more than their fair share of that. However, every week there are only certain calls that he decides to speak about. Now, invariably, they tend to be the calls that cop the most attention in the media. Right? Now, let's talk about the next thing that came up in the media, and again, it's an outrageous call from Annesley, and that's the Zach Lomax tackle on Andrew Davey. Now, if you've ever seen a dangerous tackle, something that qualifies as a dangerous tackle, That is it, because what we're talking about are a couple of things. First of all, the action was dangerous. Secondly, the intent was to cause damage. Now, I want to specify that in any tackle, a player is looking to cause, make a legitimate impact on a player. Let them. They want them to feel that they've been hit. I mean, they're the best tackles, the ones that have that sort of impact. But there's a line that can be crossed, and the NRL has been going out of their way to make sure that the game is tough but safe. Tell me, in what world that tackle was safe in any way, shape, or form? And there's Annesley talking about the technicality of his arm wasn't around the bloke's throat, therefore it's not a head slam. Excuse me? Let's talk about some of the other tackles that happen in the NRL where it's far more about the outcome than about the action that happens or the supposed intent or putting a hand or an arm somewhere. I mean, we're talking about this was smashing a bloke down into the ground where his head is going to bounce into the ground. He went off for a head injury assessment, Andrew Davey. He's slammed into the ground with force. It was a tackle where he was at best horizontal with the ground, marginally above the horizontal when you look at it, because there was that lifting action as well that came in from Ben Hunt. So you've got a combination of a lifting action from Hunt and a slamming down action. There are softer tackles than that go on report and get suspension, where the player themselves have contributed to the tackle by moving their body weight forward. I know I'm rambling on, fellas, but I'm flummoxed over that because Annesley gave that the tick of approval. John, what does that mean, a tackle like that getting the tick of approval?
I mean, if you're a particularly psychotic coach and wanted to win at all costs, I'd be instructing your defensive training to be changing right now. I'd be looking for opportunities to be executing a chest slam, a legal chest slam at every possible or perceived opportunity, because you will gain a massive tactical advantage. You'll be literally robbing your opposition team of players by virtue of concussion tests that they're going to fail legally. So I have no idea. I said to you earlier today, Sixties, we had a quick chat, that it feels like Annesley must consult like a magic 8-ball before he comes out with his answers. Because who in their right mind would say that is a sound tackle technique that is good for the health of the game in an era where we are actively trying to promote anti-concussion techniques? And here we are saying, no, this is fine. This is sweet. This is great.
Yep. So before, when I said that his interpretation of Clint Gutherson's tackling action being one of a strip, he's more than doubled down when he said that that's a legitimate tackle.
Yeah, exactly.
That doesn't deserve any penalty. I mean, I can almost guarantee that if, and this, I mean, this is where it gets into the realms where my bias might show through, or maybe a victim mentality. I don't know. But you just have this sense that if that was an Eels player that made a tackle like that they would have been marched, or at the very least had 10 minutes in the bin.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that the Dragons get an advantage of that. We've just so often seen Eels players this year especially get either suspended or spent time in the bins, in the sin bin for, I guess, things that we've seen other players walk from.
How often this year, in terms of not foul play but professional fouls, have we seen an offside player get involved in a goal line stand after a line break, and then it's just been apparently sufficient, go to the next set? Will Pennicini got sin bin for that. And I thought that was the right call at the time, but it has not been upheld at all since. including against Parramatta. We've had opportunities on the goal line where a player in offside position has impeded our ability to spread the ball, and it was penalty sufficient.
Okay, well, let me throw now to Clint, because I sit next to Clint at the matches, and Clint was losing his mind. I can report to this. He was completely losing his mind. He was probably losing his mind as much for the fact that he couldn't swear because he had his young nephew with him at his coming to his first Eels game, and he was ready for the expletives to flow, if not being yelled out, certainly not being yelled out, but certainly expressing himself to me in more colourful terms than what he could. And I've got a reply from one of our readers, Chris Kay, to our Instant Reaction podcast, and he's run through a number of instances, and Clint's issue at the game was all of the different incidents, be it offsides, be it interference in the ruck, where the whistle just was completely put away or near put away in the second half for a whole series of indiscretions. But let's just go through some of them, Clint. There was Ravalawa put on a shot early in the game, not long before his first try. Sin bin?
Yep. Well, we saw Mike Acifo sin bin for exactly that on more than one occasion, I think, this year. So, Dick?
Yep. Okay. A professional foul committed by the Dragons just before Cardi's second try, where they were slowing the ball down. Now, I know how you feel about the slowing the ball down at key instances, because it was going on at lots of key moments.
Yep. John just touched on the point about Will Penasini earlier this year against the Roosters. I'm a supporter of the decision as well. But if you're going to purposely slow down the ball, following a break or a half break, that prevents the team in possession, the attacking team, from having the opportunity to attack a fractured defensive line, that is a professional foul. Henceforth, a sin bin. Tick.
Yep. Next one. Gutherson being held up and Laurie making a tackle that wasn't too far away from looking like a cannonball tackle.
Yep. And any player in which they're held up in the like that Gutho was, the cheap shot, and we saw Gutho. There was the whiplash that's there, and for the better part of probably the last two seasons, whiplash has been used as a guide for penalising late tackles, most notably on the kickers on the last. But I think back to a number of years ago when this became very topical, and I think, and John may be able to correct me here, with when Riley Brown was playing for the Roosters, and there was it was the late man in, and we saw that whiplash action. We saw plenty of instances across the course of the rest of that season that were very heavily penalised. And now it's like, well, that's not topical at the moment. It's not the flavour of the month. But tick, there should have been at the very least a penalty for that.
Gutherson taken out of the play when running a support line.
Completely missed, and I'm gonna shoot back to you here, Sixties, because you were very fired up about that one. I think that was the play in which you called out the touchy.
I let rip with the flag boy comments. So letting him know what I thought of him missing it. Yep. A late hit on Moses when he was kicking.
That just seems par for the course now. It's almost as though that happens with such regularity that it just gets forgotten about. But tick, he was hit late.
Yeah, and then this one's probably a bit of a 50-50. It's not so much a shot from the Dragons, but rather a 50-50 call. First of all, we agree wholeheartedly that Bryce Cartwright played at the ball when it was kicked through, and it gave the Dragons possession for one of their tries. But the other one, with Dylan Brown, it might have been a bit more of a 50-50 call, because he was furiously chasing back, and the kick in field absolutely skyrocketed into him, and whether he was kicking at the ball, whether it was his running action that just made contact with the ball, bit of a 50-50 call. What was your thoughts on that?
Look, that call I can cop, but again, it's very much a case of as long as it's officiated and interpreted consistently, and I'm not sure that we see that.
Yeah.
That's where I would take aim at with something like that. But I was happy for that call to be the call that it was during the game. I wasn't upset with that, but it becomes frustrating when you watch other games and you see wasn't played at team retains possession. You don't like to get stuck in a cycle of whataboutism, but at the same time, given the closeness of the competition this year in particular, these are things that that when they compound across the course of the game can absolutely change not just the outcome of the game, but certainly how it builds towards the outcome. It's you could be defending for another 5 minutes after something like that, or it could be incidental and suddenly you've got good field position because the ball's ricocheted away and you get a turnover at the point where the ball was kicked, and suddenly you're attacking. There can be point swings there. So that's the only time which is, I guess, the position that you take in taking exception to those types of calls. But personally, I was fine with that one, so I'm neutral on that.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing too is that if the Eels wanted to roll the dice with a captain's challenge there, they were entitled to do that. They chose not to, which I guess leads them to think, well, Dylan certainly didn't go over and say, I didn't play at it. So we'll give that a tick as the referee getting that one correct or close to correct as we can accept anyway. But John, out of all those, anything you want to add anything further to?
Well, some of those calls make me question why we have touch judges. The fact that Gufferson got drilled off the ball attacking the goal line, the charge down that deflected into the kicker again, picked up by an offside dragon, because the charge down obviously puts everyone onside, but then it touches the kicker again. He's now offside, and none of the three main officials caught that. So, yeah, it's stuff like that that really gets you frustrated, because you can cop some missed calls, like a borderline forward pass going one way or the other. That stuff happens. But when there is stuff that fundamentally these guys are meant to be looking out for and they're getting it wrong, and then we have Annesley come out talking about intent to strip on a full-strength try-saving a tackle attempt, it feels like we're getting the messages very much mixed up in what's important when it comes to officiating.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the other fallout from the weekend came from the NRLW, where Kennedy Cherrington was sent off for a nasty lifting tackle, and without question, there's guilt there with that tackle. It's maybe not so much as intent as just getting it horribly wrong. It was a nasty looking tackle. However, the big fallout is that she's effectively been suspended for just on half a season in getting a 4-match suspension. Let's reiterate for listeners, the NRLW season is only 9 games long. The NRL season is played over 24 matches. Now, that would probably be the equivalent of getting about a 10-match suspension in the NRL. Now, how often do we see, and that was Kennedy's first offence. I spoke to her on Sunday afternoon back at the club about, what she was, how she felt about things. And she said, look, she said, I'm a clean skin. I haven't had to face the judiciary before. And, she was hopeful that it wouldn't be too bad. Well, unfortunately, Kennedy, they viewed what you've done as the equivalent of a 10-week suspension in the NRL. I'm lost for words, John. I'm absolutely lost for words.
It's one of those.
I mean, we've got no problems if that was 4 weeks in an NRL season.
Yeah.
It would be deserved.
Yeah, 4 weeks in an NRL season, you would have said, all right, they're not challenging the charge, so it's the equivalent of taking nearly guilty. So, maybe it might have been 5 weeks, before the plea. So that's right in the vicinity of a dangerous tackle. You cop that in the chin, you move on. It comes back to what we're saying in the post-game show at Jack's Bar and Grill 60s, the questions about whether there was scalability in how the MRC and the judiciary operate in the NRLW, and I guess the question is no, because it needs to be said that the entire judicial code of conduct when it comes to the MRC and the judiciary and their processes in the NRL is built, it's scaled, it's balanced around a 27-round regular season. So when you do something, when you make an indiscretion, you get it wrong, shoulder charge, high tackle, dissent, as we saw with Reece Walsh and you know the incident with the referee, every bit of that conduct is scaled around how much it should cost you on a 27-round regular season and a 4-week final series. And it obviously hasn't been scaled down to the NRLW. In terms of the actual punishment on a 27-round competition, she just got a 12-week suspension. It's like 0.444 repeated for what she got in NRLW, which scales up to 12 games. So when was the last time you saw a tackle in the NRL get that? Was it Hopewadi with the flying elbow on Keith Galloway? Was that the last time we had something of that magnitude? I can't remember.
That would have been 04 when that happened.
Yeah, like how long has it been since we saw a double-digit round or week suspension for a dangerous throw in the NRL?
Yeah, no. Look, I can't remember, and I mean, what's the course? What recourse has the club or Kennedy got? There isn't grounds to appeal it, is there? I mean, that's just a decision.
Yeah, they could have fought. I use fought very loosely at the judiciary tonight for the grading, but I don't think our argument of scalability would hold any grounds, because that's almost like a constitutional argument when it comes to the NRLW, and you can't do that stuff in the course of a season. That's an off-season matter.
Well, then it's an off-season matter of some importance. It makes. Look, you have to feel for Kennedy in this regard, because she could have avoided it by avoiding making a tackle like that, but again, we're still talking about in a 9-week season missing 4 weeks for a first offence.
There was some extenuating circumstances there too. Maddie Jones didn't do her any favours in the context of the tackle, because she was wrapped on the ball and was trying to sort of pull the ball carrier down and get the tackle completed just as Kennedy started to drive in the tackle. But yeah, it is a cautionary reminder about using that tackle grip in between the legs, isn't it? Because just so much can go out of your control. And yeah, you can get a good tackle out of it, but in that case, if a teammate's doing something else and pulling or pushing another way, it can take the tackle out of your control very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, just in a bit of other Eels news, Clint, there was some good results for the Eels lower grades. First of all, the Jersey Flegg had a massive 48-10 victory over the Dragons. And just to provide context for people in this regard, the Eels Jersey Flegg team prior to the weekend was in 6th place, whereas the Dragons was in 7th place. The Dragons team was in 6th place, and it was an absolute shellacking. I've watched the match, video of the match, and the Eels forwards absolutely smashed the Dragons, it then opened up plenty of opportunities for attack for the Eels, and their backs certainly ran riot. Buds Arthur, a screamer of a game, an absolute screamer of a game at dummy half, had a try double himself. Ethan Martin, another great game, a try double for him. Matty Komalafi got a try double. Richard Penasini playing inside of Matt Komalafi was absolutely on fire. Sanders and Lynn got a try each, and Brock Parker, he got the last try with a lot of hustle, chasing through a kick to get that the final points on the board with I think less than a minute to go. But they now jump the Dragons, move to 6th place, and it's a race with the Melbourne Storm, who they defeated last week, for that 5th spot, because it's only a top 5 in the Jersey flag. What's your feedback on that match, mate?
Massive swing results, and if there's the time to be coming home with a wet sail, with troops starting to come on board, and we referenced or alluded to last week in Teamless Tuesday last week, it was a very healthy looking Jersey flag side that was named. I don't think we probably anticipated them having this good a result, but mighty helpful for them in the context of their season. And it's almost a shame that after a game like that, they're going into the bye, and you'd almost want to roll on with that type of performance into the next week. But they've given themselves an opportunity, and I don't think there was a bad player on the field in that game. Personally, there was a lot of guys looking very sharp, and as you alluded to, their 60s, a forward pack that was very hungry and rolled through. And some of those boys in that pack who have played plenty of New South Wales Cup games this year, and they're reaping the benefits of some of that more senior football. And despite the fact they haven't necessarily got the results or the chockies up in that grade, you're better physically prepared for a grade like flag for it regardless. So it's good to see them be able to leverage that experience and use it to their advantage in this game, a very important one.
Yeah, and that game was held on Saturday afternoon. Unfortunately, when the BGA luncheon was being held in Parramatta Leagues Club, so we weren't able to get out there and cover that. And likewise, the New South Wales Cup match, also against the Dragons, was at another venue again. So it wasn't tied in with the Jersey Flegg game over at Cabramatta on Saturday. No, it was played not as the curtain raiser, it was one of the curtain raisers for the NRL match against the Dragons on Sunday. It was actually played as a standalone at Kellyville Park at 11 a.m. on Sunday. And unfortunately, again, that does not allow for too many people to be able to get to that game and then get down to CommBank Stadium, get parking, enjoy the day at CommBank Stadium, or in fact, for those of us that were involved with the Blue and Gold Alliance. And I know there are, and I was talking to people involved in the Blue and Gold Alliance, some of the players, they were really disappointed that they weren't able to watch the New South Wales Cup team running around at the stadium on Sunday as well. So, it's hopefully we can get a bit of better timing, scheduling with these matches, but we didn't get to see it. But nonetheless, a massive 40 form turnaround for the Eels, a 44-28 victory over the Dragons. I was getting messages from Kellyville Park about how good the Eels were performing in the first half, and about the form of certain players, including Brendan Hands, who was having a ripper of a game. Clint, I know that you are familiar with someone who was up there watching the game.
Yep.
So
Dad was providing us the live updates, which was great. Certainly, given that we all had our own respective game day duties out at CommBank. So shout out to Dad. Thank you for the play-by-play, and he cited and in watching the highlights after, Brendan Hands had a very good game in that grade. Obviously, the score sheet suggests that Dejan Arce was heavily involved in getting a hat trick. And
no surprise that both of those players are named in the Eels team this week. Then,
yeah, and given that both those players had spent quite a bit of time in first grade recently, it's similar to what I said with Flegg. It's good to see some of those guys go back down to that grade, and although things maybe haven't been working out as well as they had been earlier in the year in first grade, they can go down there and dominate the way that someone who has been playing first grade should. that's encouraging, and that helps build confidence for the likes of Dejan and for Brendan. Had a couple of try assists, and even Wonga Blake got on the board, and it's important that those guys back down there get a confidence boosting win like that, because it's been a very tough season for the New South Wales Cup side. And if we're going to be any hope of making the finals in NRL, we need the guys that are on the periphery and push, attempting to push back into the side, firing on all cylinders as well, and giving BA and the coaching staff some headaches when it comes to team selections.
Yep. So let's segue from that 40 into Teamless Tuesday news. So can you take us through the big calls that have been made for the Eels NRL, NRLW teams? And again, we remind people that the New South Wales Cup and Jersey Flegg teams have a bye this week.
Yeah, BA's back to spot welding on that left edge, trying to find something that will hold together as the Eels face down a fearsome opponent this week. Out is the rookie Arthur Miller-Stephen. He's dropped back and will have the week off, given that those buys you mentioned are happening in the Cup and Flegg, so there's no football for him. Coming into the team is Dejan Elsie. He takes over at left centre, though. So he's going to push Bailey Simonson out to the left wing, and coming into the starting left edge back row was Andrew Davey, which bumps Ryan Madison back to his specialist interchange position, where I imagine, given that we're taking on a fearsome Brisbane Broncos forward pack, BA will probably want to try and load up in the middle and try and compete with the likes of Haas and Flegler and Carrigan as much as possible, and he's going to need every quality middle he can get.
Yeah, and it's going to be a challenge too, because Dejan, although he has played some centre, he's primarily a man that's played in the halves or at fullback, and this is a specialist outside back position. I've written about it in the past about the options that the Eels have for outside backs. We've seen a rookie having to make his debut last week on the wing. We've seen BA now this week against a heavyweight like the Broncos go for a little bit more experience in pushing Bailey Simonson out to the wing and moving Dejan Elsie into centres. So he's hoping that that's going to provide the answers to the left edge wobbles.
I think. I'm not sure if he's hoping to provide the answers, 60s. There's no way to sugarcoat this in a great way. It's pick a rookie winger up against Selwyn Cobbo and, have the vast weight and size difference there, or it's pick a guy. And Dejan's done some good things for us this year, but he had his defensive struggles at 5'8" for the Parramatta Eels, and now he's being pushed into the most technically challenging defensive position in the back line against a Broncos outfit that's going to have their field general back too, by the way. As is always the case of Parramatta games, it wouldn't be an opponent's sort of game without core players coming back in. And for the Broncos, they get Adam Reynolds back. And not to be slept on, but Kobe Havington on the interchange is actually a pretty good player. He's in there this week too, so they've got a very good team that's just gotten better in time for Parramatta up at the Gabba.
Yeah, and can I just say, look, I'm now looking back on that decision to challenge get for a downgrade for Micah Sevo. Like, he'd be done with his suspension.
He would have been eligible to play for this game, correct? Yes.
But I didn't understand it at the time, why they were challenging the grading, and now I have to question it even more. I look, not that Micah has been in great form this year, but you're still talking about a big unit being able to cover another, big unit running at him. So,
it's a huge blow. Micah, even under form, is considerably better as a specialist winger than any other option we have right now. And, going up against a big unit like Selwyn Cobbo, we really need as much size and quality as we can get on the flank, and we just don't have that right now. I know Bailey Simonson's going to go out there and give it his everything, but the reality is with Bailey is he looked far more comfortable at centre than he did at wing. And then that's without factoring in that it's a fragile combination that, I say combination, they've never played together as a centre three-quarter wing pairing between himself and Dejan Arce. So, yeah, it's hard to be confident in what that left edge can do up against a lethal Broncos right edge that is going to have, Reece Walsh running off of Adam Reynolds and setting up Selwyn Cobbo, and that's Katoni Stagg's side too, so he's going to bring the physicality. But, we make do with what we have, and we hope that we can win the game elsewhere.
Clint, so I just want to put a question to you both. And, BA has rarely been known for smoke and mirrors in his time as Parramatta coach. Do we think that this is how the side will run out on Friday night? Is there the possibility that there might be some, maybe positional switches? Maybe Dylan Brown defends at centre, and Dejan defends at 5'8", one player in there.
I don't think it makes a difference.
Does Brendan Hands possibly start at 5'8" and Dylan Brown at 6? And we reconstruct our attacking line when we got the ball, but for the purposes of the defensive line, we have Dylan defending at centre and Brendan Hands at 5'8". Don't know.
In your first scenario, I don't think it makes much difference. I think the Broncos just pick on Dejan where he is, regardless of alignment at centre or 5'8".
Agreed.
In the second one, is it worth tinkering that much with the back line? I don't know. When we sent Dylan to the centres last time, it just ended up putting him on an island where he just didn't get involved in the game. So yeah.
The other thing is too that you get more edge problems created by the inside players than you do just with the simple jam from the winger, or the centre taking the wrong option. 9 times out of 10, and that might be harsh on Dylan, Dylan makes the right decision defensively, which assists the players outside of him to make the right decision. Now, we saw that even if they're making the wrong decision, Dylan has that capacity to slide across and cover behind them when the play goes past. Now, he wasn't able to stop Ravalawa because very few people trying to make a one-on-one tackle on Ravalawa 5 metres out and looking to take out his legs over the sideline are going to have some success. They did stop him once or twice, which was a credit to the slide, and I think it was Artie on one tackle and Dylan on the other.
Yep.
But you probably got less chance of things going wrong with Dylan at 5'8" than the inside player being Dejan. I think Dylan, providing he's as switched on as he can be, is communicating to his outside players and that they follow the calls that are happening about where to move. So, look, I think we're going to get into it in the preview podcast later in the week, but we know the team's going to be up against it. One question I did want to throw to you, Clint, was your thoughts on the inclusion this week of Brendan Hands and taking away a forward off the interchange bench for that to happen.
Well, it's clear that we want to have Ryan Madison as a part of the middle rotation there, and to some of the points that you were that 40 was hinting at in reading the team sheet. We obviously view our best opportunity of winning this game is to take it to the middle. That's a classic rugby league euphemism. The forwards decide who wins the game, and the backs decide by how much. But the fact of the matter is we're going to have to be able to contain Flegler, Capel, and Carrigan, and our best chance of doing that is having Ryan Madison as a part of the middle rotation. So given he plays a lot of big minutes himself, and you've got Jermaine Hopgood who plays a lot of big minutes, we're probably going to want to have at least three rotations for Junior, and you've got the guys in Luca and Wiramu who will be a part of that. Those relief minutes for him, and likewise Joe Offengawi who starts working around that. You'd imagine that's that we freed up that spot for Brendan Hands because Ryan Madison plays so many minutes, and there wasn't going to be a point in having another forward like McIntyre or Ogden on the bench to do that. And likewise, I thought Joey Lussick was pretty solid on Sunday, but he was starting to fade towards the end of the game, energy-wise, and I think it's good to have that option on there, given that we probably want to have as fresh defenders in there as possible and our best defenders in there as possible. And if Brendan can provide some relief minutes there, or even potentially give some different options in the attacking line, because it has to be mentioned again. Brendan Haynes is a legitimate utility. He spent the majority of his time in his first grade career at hooker, but this is a guy with history in both the halves and at lock forward in the juniors. So he gives us a genuine utility option. I'll get the words out right, listeners. I'm sorry. But likewise, hopefully, with Woody now back in the side as well, we've got our explosive forward off the bench. We've got Maddo, who we know will punch out at least 60 minutes. We know Jermaine Hopgood will probably punch out somewhere between 60 to 80 as well. We obviously want to have Junior being the senior leader and forward. And even though he hasn't been in the best of form this year himself, he's still someone that we look to in these games, and with that experience that you hope will step up. We've got to give him the best opportunity with the minutes that he plays. And likewise, we've got to have the defensive structures around him to support that. It's probably a combination of all those factors that's led to Brendan's selection on the bench, and likewise, Maddo being back part of the middle rotation, probably for all of his minutes, as opposed to the split between the edge and middle he had against the Dragons.
And John, you've got the NRLW team list to take us through.
Yeah, so a couple of changes. The team very optimistically named Kennedy Cherrington to play in this game ahead of her trip to the judiciary. And I got to respect the optimism there, but even with us knowing the result now, she was never going to be available to play this particular game. So she will be scratched. But outside of that, we have technically a change backline from the one that was named last week to start on Teamless Tuesday, but Kimberly Hunt made official at centre. Alongside Toi Hiku, they're the 3 and the 4. Otherwise, it's an unchanged backline. In the halves, though, we do have a change. Poor Rosie Beckett, I think she had a concussion coming out of this one, boys. She's nowhere to be seen in the team list this week. Not in the reserves, not in the bench, not anywhere. But thankfully, Rachael Pearson is finally fit, so she's going to take her place in the team alongside Bahuka Berryman Duff in the halves. Speaking of finally fit, Elsie Albert comes in a timely return, given that there'll be no Kennedy. This team really needs a rallying presence in the middle. And it's a damn shame we're not going to see the two of them play essentially almost any football together this year. But Albert comes into the starting team working alongside Talisha O'Neill in the front row. Murphy and Murphy are in the edges. Again, Murphy named in the centres last week, but was pushed onto the edge, where I thought she had a pretty good game against Newcastle, fellas. So she looked pretty good on the edges there. We do need someone to come into the starting team to replace Kennedy. I would imagine that maybe O'Neill pushes back to lock forward, and then they bring in someone like Maddie Jones and then recall Ruby Jean Kennard-Ellis or someone of that sort of ilk. But yeah, the team going to be short a starter right now. I have to figure out that reshuffle. Otherwise, I think Kyra Simon comes onto the bench, and it's that's the end of the changes there. So waiting to see what will happen with the Kennedy Cherrington move. But outside of that, that's how the Eels shape up this week, and they're taking on a very formidable team, boys. The Brisbane Broncos absolutely eviscerated the Cowboys last week, and I look at that centre battle, and Mele Hufanga, what side did she play? Was she left edge? She's left edge, isn't she?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so that's going to be a fearsome battle there for the Eels, and I think that'll put her up against, is that Cassie on the right for us? Or Kimberly? Just trying to... I think it's Cassie, isn't it, down the right edge?
On the right, yeah.
Yeah, and it's because Zawi's the left winger and Cassie's the right centre. That's how the best way of remembering it. So Cassie's been quite impressive to start this season, but she's got one hell of assignment this week, boys, because Hufanga is an absolute beast.
Yeah, and we're not saying that in anything other than a rugby league mode.
No, that's the same way I describe Katoni Staggs or something like that. Yes. Just an absolute beast, like an animal. Like so hard to bring down and so damaging with the ball in hand. And we mentioned Melee, but that's doing disservice to a ton of other players. I mean, Gal Broughton, you know that ex-Eels love to turn up against the club. I'm expecting her to have a big game. Ali Brigginshaw, one of the best representative halves in the game. They've got a great team. Gray and Teitzel in the back row. This is a very, very good team, one that's going to challenge for the premiership. And the Eels, like I said, I thought, even though the scoreline didn't reflect it, I thought they showed some legitimate improvement against Newcastle, especially considering they were a player down for most of the second half. But they've got to find another gear or two this week, some way, somehow, with the inclusions of Pearson and Albert, if they're going to be competitive against this outstanding Brisbane lineup.
Well, we've spoken about them needing to find a line speed, and we'll talk more about this in the preview, obviously. But let's hope that the inclusion of Rachael Pearson can ignite the attack this week. Because as I said, even though the scoreline got away from them, you were pleased with the improvement in their attitude in defence, John. And now they've got to start scoring some points, and they've just simply been extremely hard to come by, and that's understandable with missing their major signing of the season, being the halfback Rachael Pearson. Clint, can you find any silver lining playing against the Broncos?
Well, yeah, it'll be a challenge. It's probably a bigger challenge than what our what the NRL team faced in their game against Brisbane. But there were some good signs there in terms of in relative to effort. Obviously having Kennedy sent off against the Knights was already going to make a challenge all that much more. But the fact that they were chasing the tackle and there was intent with line speed, despite being a player down in that game, they should look to springboard from that, and getting both Elsie and Rachael into the side as well should be cause for energy and cause to go in with. They don't need to worry about the result. When you're in a situation like the NRLW team is in, you shouldn't be chasing the result. What you should be chasing is the next play and trying to do that as perfectly as you can. The old adage of just focus on laying a brick to eventually build a house. A result will eventually come with that type of approach, but it is the might of the Broncos who have been very strong in the NRLW. Since its inception, they look very much likely to be up there amongst it again this year. So all you can do is take it play by play and set by set, and give yourself the best opportunity to compete. And who knows, we might take a result.
Yeah, wise words there, Clint. I think my take is that I think the Broncos are going to be the best advertisement for the extended NRLW season, because in past years, if you drop the first two games, you could be up against it. This year, they've dropped the first two games because they're warming into their season. They're finding their new combinations. They clicked with an almighty bang last week, and some of those signings that they've made just showed how dangerous they're going to be this season. And I think for the rest of the season, what you'll see them doing is getting stronger and stronger, and they will be a genuine threat. Okay, time to move on to NRL news. And John, RLPA and NRL are resuming talks to I guess come to some form of agreement. Do you see a light on the horizon?
Well, it's not quite the end of the Cold War, but at least we're seeing something happen. And look, it's hard to be. I'm going to be real. It's hard to be optimistic about real progress happening, given where they left off and some of the egos involved, as we've seen across the last few months. But I hope for the sake of the game, for the sake of the players, that we can get to that compromise, and the players can get those assurances that they want, the non-salary cap assurances for better long-term welfare for men, women, and former players in general. But yeah, I will be cautious, not optimistic, but hopeful, I suppose. I'm not sure if that's a great way of spinning it, but I do hope that something can get done, because obviously it's for the sake of the game, and we're now heading into the finals are just about upon us, and then the season ends first week of October. We're not that far away from having nothing on the table for season 2024 NRL or NRLW. So we need to get something done, but at the same time, the players can't just concede what they're fighting for.
Yeah, And I guess there's not too much we can say at this stage because we simply don't know whether they are going to be able to find some level of consensus, some middle ground that they can get to. So we move on. Clint, Nicho Hynes has been back in the media spotlight over his Origin omission again, all this time down the track. But this time he's opening up about the personal pressure that he faced because of the focus that he was under.
Like a self-perpetuating cycle. How interesting.
And do I feel like this is we're going round in circles?
The tall poppy was nurtured beautifully. It was fertilized and taken care of, then harvested, just be built up again. It's beautiful in a really cynical way, isn't it?
Yeah, Clint.
Yeah, it's oh goodness, it's. I mean, good on Nicho for having the courage to be honest and open and forthright. If it was me personally, I would probably have kept some of those thoughts within my inner circle as opposed to the media. But that's just me personally. Because I'd be very wary of the media given how quickly he's risen and then subsequently fallen within their eyes to what you gents just both alluded to. I would very much be approaching the media with from being guarded, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So, again, brave of him to say that, but it's the issue that I ultimately have with this particular situation is it's a very good case study for young players out there, and we've seen the same with Joseph Suali'i over the last couple of years as well. They built him up to a point where he couldn't live up. It would be impossible for anyone to live up to the accolades, especially at the age that he's at as well. It was prime set up for fall, and it's I guess a cautionary tale for some of these players, but good on Nicho for being able to humble himself and speak through some of those things. And from a personal perspective, you hope he goes okay, not too okay from a competitive perspective, because we're obviously competing with Cronulla for a final spot at the moment. But it's all part and parcel of your development. It's also probably an insight into the type of access that we have to players these days, because in a bygone era, and not even that long ago, a decade or maybe just a little bit longer ago, we wouldn't have heard these types of thoughts from players, and there certainly wouldn't have been the level of vulnerability that Nicho has displayed as well. So kudos to him for again having that bravery to do that. And we'll see how it all unfolds for him. But yeah, an interesting thing for him to open up with, and obviously it's probably just exhausting some of those demons, given that they had a very relieving, albeit frustrating from an Eels supporter's perspective, win over South Sydney on the weekend.
Staying with the Sharks, boys, a bit of breaking news coming out that stalwart back rower, club captain and premiership winner Wade Graham is going to be hanging up the boots at the end of his season. So no surprises, his play has definitely tailed off in recent years with injuries and concussions mounting. But yeah, going down as a 2016 premiership winner for them, and a very storied rep player for New South Wales, and probably one of the better back rowers in recent years.
Yeah, our congratulations to him on his career and on knowing how he feels about football and when it's time to give it away. And I think he's set himself up for a bit of work in the media from here on in. So no doubt he's going to be staying involved in rugby league and having a rugby league identity, and setting oneself up after football is probably a big part of the battle when players retire. I just wanted to make one comment about Nicho Hynes. I hope that there's something learnt in the Nicho Hynes situation for both the media and also for people who enjoy being part of social media and offering their opinions about what's going on or with different players. A player like Nicho Hynes, and he talked about it, can try to distance himself and shield himself from the media or from social media by just not reading it. However, his support network in checking in on him are basically letting him know that there were things written about him. And I've long banged on about the fact that once you start getting into something more than just commenting about form on players, and we take a strong stance on this on the Cumberland Throw, that we don't like abuse about players. And, that criticism of form is one thing. Anything that crosses the line and becomes personal is completely different. It's because that's a great example of how players, no matter how hard they try, cannot be completely shielded from trolls or people that just want to cross the line. Because the thing is, someone in where they have all best intentions is still going to open them up to some of the comments that are going around out there. And in this instance, look, it wasn't too bad. It was all about the debate around his selection, non-selection for Origin. But I think there's a lesson there to learn that it's damn hard to be a professional rugby league player and shield yourself from the background noise. It is just there, even when you think you've done your best to avoid it. So bear that in mind, anyone listening. If you like to throw shots at players, just be aware that they're human as well, and that it can have lots of repercussions. And you know what? A player's form can be the result of so many things that are going on in their life.
Absolutely.
Even away from football. And we've spoken to players about this, and we've known the scenarios that have happened with players when they've been out of form, and they don't want to be out of form, but that's the last thing that they want. And sometimes if their headspace has been distracted by other things, there's it's just not going to help their game. So anyway, moving on, we've already touched on the fact that Adam Reynolds is back, and we bemoaned the fact that this follows the pattern of opposition players, big name opposition players, returning to their team,
having milestone games.
The Eagles, yep. But just on the Broncos,
Everything.
Payne Haas going to market. And of course, the interesting thing around him is one of his greatest, not one of his greatest confidant, mentor, whatever you want to call him, player whisperer, just happens to be Sonny Bill Williams, who has strong connections to the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, who are strongly rumoured to be in the race to secure his contract should he leave the Broncos at the end of 2024. They're talking about him knocking back an amount of $1.1 million from the Broncos to seek a deal elsewhere. Obviously, the eyes will be firmly focused, I'm talking about the general public, on if he leaves the Broncos, where he goes to, how much he signs for, and just how legit any particular deal is done. Because I tell you what, any club that's prepared to stump up, maybe 1.3 or 1.4 million for a prop, they're going to have to answer about the rest of their roster.
Yeah, that's my immediate question is, how do you pry? It's not a matter of how, obviously lots of money, but how do you pry Payne from the Broncos and also build a competitive roster? I don't know how you answer that question without absurd amount of TPAs, or obviously something beyond TPAs, which gets you in trouble if you're Gordon Tallis when it comes to talking about. But yeah, look, this is a problem that in any salary cap system, it always rears its head, where there is an absolutely elite, borderline generational player in a position that is valued. Like, props are incredibly important players, but they're not as good as halfbacks or fullbacks or 5'8s or dummy halves. And you can't pay certain positions the premium playmaker position money and expect to be competitive long term. Like, you might get a good season as a team together if you happen to have a gun crop of juniors coming through and pick up some bargain buys elsewhere that, fit in really nicely. But as a long-term, blueprint or schematic, it does not point towards sustained success. So fascinated to see how this one plays out. Obviously Payne Haas would be great as an eel, but again, How do you squeeze him into our team and remain competitive? It just doesn't fit together. So whether it's the Bulldogs, the West Tigers, the Roosters, I mean, you talk about that Sonny Bill connection. Does that point towards the Bulldogs or does it point towards the Tricolours?
I think hasn't he currently got his connections with the Bulldogs and doing some work around them?
But I know obviously when you're on the books, but in terms of player experience in the modern NRL, if you're Sonny Bill, are you pointing towards, Belmore or to Bondi? Two vastly different experiences for him. He came back to Bondi and had so much success there. So I don't know. It's a fascinating thing that you're looking from the outside in on, though.
And I was just going to throw this to Clint as well, because by way of comparison, we've had Corey Horsburgh just his extension at the Raiders has just been announced, and it averages out at about 600,000 a season for 4 seasons. So he is now an Origin prop. He's signing for an amount that would be $200,000. $800,000 less potentially than what Payne Haas is signing for. And if you want to talk about the other end of it, where you've got other Origin props at the Eels in both junior and reg, and they're around about that 750,000-800,000 mark. They're really top of the range in terms of the money paid for props in the NRL. And again, you're talking about the money for Payne Haas absolutely dwarfing their contracts as experienced representative players. So Corey Horsburgh, relatively new representative player, 600,000 a year for the next 4 years. Junior and reg around that 750-800 mark. Very experienced rep forwards. Payne Haas, potentially at least 1.1, potentially 1.3, 1.4.
And the diminishing returns once you get past RCG and Junior, start becoming pretty heavy, don't they? In terms of Payne Haas, best prop in the game. I don't think there's any doubt about that. He is an incredible athlete. He's young. His best football is ahead of him unless he has a serious injury, which is always a possibility. But that's a risk of any contract. But at 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.3 plus is legitimately what it might take to pry him down from Brisbane and get him into Sydney. You're talking about Junior Paulo or Junior Barlow, or Reg, plus another $500,000 player.
Well, you are close to basically saying you could either sign one Payne Haas, or you could sign a or you could sign Corey Horsburgh plus either
Junior or
RCG. Right. So you could basically sign 2 Origin props or 1 Origin prop. So what's the best balance for your team? Well, you know what? If you spend 1.2 to 1.4 on one prop, you are sacrificing probably around 500,000 or 600,000 of your cap on one player.
Crazy.
You're sacrificing another star player signing to make that one. And then if that player is out in the season, and Manly face this with Tom Trbojevic, don't they? Because he's up north of that $1 million mark. So every time that he's out for his extended periods of time, their salary cap that's available to them is immediately down by more than a tenth. So, that is the price of someone like that. So, interesting space to watch.
To me, it's akin to going all in on a tech stock. You might buy it at the right time and be on a really good company. You can ride the wave, but they're also just susceptible to the overnight crashes as well. And not to hijack this into a financial podcast. Maybe we'll do that in the off season, boys. It could pay absolute dividends for him, but whoever he may potentially go to, that is. But 40 said it best: law of diminishing returns. And you're going to a point where you're absolutely sacrificing the not just future years, but potentially the makeup of your club, because when one player sees a certain level of say a hypothetical like this, Payne's form drops, and you've got other players in there who are carrying that load or feel as though they're carrying that load, but they're on 300K a year. They go, well, this guy's earning $1 million more than me, and I'm making half his tackles for him.
Serious contract agitation.
I should be worth at least 600K myself. Well, we don't have the ability to pay you 600K. Well, stuff this. I'm going across to X club who are at least going to give me 450K a year, because at least I'm going to get a 33% increase on my salary now.
And to spin the indefatigable Susan around and change the perspective to Payne's, he also needs to be wary, and you look at players like Matt Burton and whatnot, about going to a club that will offer him 1.3 million. I mean, if he's happy to just be financially set up for the maximum amount of compensation, that's one thing. But, elite players tend to like winning. Average players tend to like winning. So when you take that big offer and you end up, going to a club that has its cap crippled, like whether it's the Bulldogs or any of the other suitors that are, been linked to him, that is a very legitimate question he has to ask himself is, how much is it worth to him? How much is the extra dollars worth, for not playing finals football or being, mired in mediocrity, being one and done in the finals, and in a team that just can't build a structured roster that has, serious credentials to challenge the premiership. And that's the reality that would face him, taking that sort of money elsewhere. So, look, Brisbane are set up for long-term success, as much as it frustrates me, seeing them back to being a powerhouse. But, realistically for him, he needs to think very hard about maximizing his notional value under the dollars and maximizing his value for his career in terms of success. Because we talk about diminishing returns on the salary cap. There are also diminishing returns in life. Like, your dollars can only go so far when you're already earning $1 million. Like, you can accumulate more wealth, but you're already living a life of luxury. So,
you're not worried about the cost of a coffee or the cost of the groceries at that point.
Exactly.
It's different to the guy who's on the minimum wage contract who goes, oh, you know what? I probably can't get premium beef mince this week.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the guy that's on NRL minimum wage, so 110, that gets bumped up to 150. That is a significant change in his.
It's life changing.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas for Payne,
now I can put a deposit on a house versus I'm having to share a rental apartment.
And again, there's a lot of nuances. If Payne is unhappy at Brisbane because of other stuff, then yes, that also justifies a move. But yeah, don't just chase the dollars. Is when you're in that sort of earning bracket, don't just chase the dollars.
Well, and the other big news in the NRL, and it's about moving clubs, is Sam Burgess. He's picked up a gig as a coach in the Super League with Warrington. Yep. Now, quick comment from you two fellas, and it need only be one word as well, because, again, we're yet to see what will happen. But first thing is, will South miss him as an assistant coach next year? Like, will it impact their team's performance? And secondly, how soon do you think you will see him return to the NRL in a head coach capacity, if at all? So, Clint, your answers to those two questions?
South won't miss him at all. They're a well-resourced club. He'll be replaced. He's good for culture there, but and I don't want to be disingenuous because I don't know what his role there is, but there's a good nucleus of coaches at South Sydney, so they'll be able to manage his departure. In terms of how soon we see him back, do you say exclusively in a head coaching capacity?
Yep.
If that, I don't think we'll see him be an NRL head coach, but happy to be proven wrong. I kind of liken this not too dissimilar to Benji becoming head coach at the Tigers in a couple of years. You would like to have seen them, I guess, have a little bit more coaching pedigree before they ascend to those types of roles, because it's very different to drawing up some set plays and and some training drills. And again, I don't want to cheapen what they do down to just that, to having to deal with all of the media scrutiny, the constant media pressures. You're not an afterthought the way you are as an assistant coach. You're the one that's in front and center of absolutely everything from a promotional perspective of the club. You're the face of the brand. There's a lot of extra responsibilities that come along with being the head coach, as well as a lot of extra pressures. And part of the reason that you see, I guess, the average age of NRL coaches, Wardy might be able to help me out here. I'm just going to throw a ballpark figure out there as mid 40s, is because some of these guys, whether they're ex-players or they've been involved in around footy for a while, it takes a while to get the credentials and as well as the emotional temperament. And not to suggest that those guys don't have that, but it's just by virtue of experience. It's just plying your trade and earning your stripes, as opposed to these guys who are only a few years retired. It'll be a lot more demanding for them, and given the recency of their retirements, pressure on them because they're still relevant names. So there comes a lot more unwanted attention because of that. So, yeah, I'm not saying necessarily that it's a bad idea, but I questioned whether it's the right time for Sam to be doing that. But you got to take the opportunities, because life doesn't wait for you to be ready. You've got to be ready to go for it. So wish him all the best and all the success, and hopefully he goes all right over there.
Yeah, John?
Yeah, there was a lot of hype for Burgess on NRL Tonight and NRL 360 today. And I was sort of like scratching my head, like, did I miss a memo? But, evidently he's outside of like some of his off-field stuff, which, wouldn't have affected a lot of people inside the game. He's quite a likable individual, and a lot of players are drawn to his, personality. So, that sort of has the makings of a player's coach. But like Clint dived into, there is a lot more to being an NRL head coach than there is to being an assistant head coach. It is probably, you talk about the jump for, a jersey flag or cup player coming into the NRL and the speed of the game changing and how difficult it is. Arguably, the jump from assistant coach to NRL head coach is even more difficult. You are taking on a mountain of work. You have so many responsibilities, so many things you need to be thinking about at all times a day. It takes a very certain type of person to be an NRL head coach. That is my estimation of it. There aren't many that are cut out for it. It is a high pressure, high leverage, ruthless, field. There is barely any failure tolerated. And going to the ESL was a good place to cut his teeth. I think that's the right move for him. I'm not sure if it's the right move in terms of the chronology of it all, if he's ready, but he's going to go to Warrington and he'll have a lot of support because he's a cult hero. As one of the most storied Poms in recent memory when it comes to rugby league. But I'm not convinced he'll come back and be an NRL head coach, although the panels on NRL Tonight and NRL 360 were, talking about not only coming back, but winning a premiership and voting for that. So, the data says, the numbers say the odds aren't good in terms of former players becoming successful head coaches. It's just hard. So you wish him the best, and it'd be a cool story if he does. But right now, I'm not holding my breath.
Well, I'll cut to the chase. A, won't be missed. B, will not come back as a head coach unless he's either takes the English Super League by absolute storm and is regarded as an absolute revelation as a coach, and then B, that there is a club prepared to roll the dice on a rookie coach, and what clubs that normally falls to.
And
so
even taking the ESL by storm is no guarantee of NRL success.
That's what I'm saying.
Warrington's a club that has struggled for success as well. They've been chasing an elusive title for quite some time. They've been thereabouts for a number of years, but not made that final jump.
Yeah, so they're going for an identifiable name rather than an identifiable coach. And as I said, I think should he come back, I think it's only likely to go. He'd only get a gig from a club that is genuinely prepared to roll the dice. So now we wrap things up, fellas, and almost feel, John, like we should have another stinger here at some point. And given the lack of a stinger for this, I'm going to either start you off with a "ooh yeah," or if you smell what I'm cooking, or perhaps a "woo" on this, because we've got another wrestling move introduced. It's the scorpion tackle, or if you're familiar with your wrestling moves, it's probably close to a reverse camel clutch, but it's reared its head in the NRL last weekend. Yes, it's been dubbed the scorpion tackle. Can you talk me through this, John?
I've been thinking about this for a while. We're going to have to do an off-season article and find out what might be the most effective, professional wrestling moves to bring into the game, because right now you could do a spine buster, you could do the people's elbows, a post-try celebration in NRL, but you could do a rock bottom. The rock bottom is actually the natural extension of the what's his name from the
Zach Lomax.
Zach Lomax tackle. It is literally just going across the chest and slamming someone's head into the ground. This one came out of the Cowboys and Broncos NRL game, and I sort of missed it initially, but it popped up in the media as a bit of a furor, and there was the whole war of words about the intent behind it. But yeah, essentially, there's some footage out there, some stills and whatnot about Cowboys players getting a Broncos runner who's on his belly in the ruck, and sort of grabbing the leg and pulling it back over their back in sort of like a reverse scorpion tail sort of setup. So yeah, it's the wrestler, eh? While we're dealing with the big issues like Clinton Gutherson obviously stripping the ball in a full stretch tackle, these are the ones that are popping up. And yeah, it's always interesting whether there's intent behind this stuff. Like I said, I'm not super well versed on how many instances of it in the game there were, but it's one of those ones to monitor. If it pops up again and it becomes a bit of a pattern, then we might just have a new wrestling technique.
Clint, what's your take on it? Is the scorpion the ideal name to give it? It sounds like we're from 40's description, like it is that tail of the scorpion being bent back.
I want to know who's given the responsibility of coming up with these names, and then it becomes rugby league folklore that is forever known. From henceforth, from this day, it shall be known as the scorpion tackle. Secondly, I also want to get those sound bits on a soundboard 60s. I think we absolutely have use of those as stingers in the future. You might even want to give our listeners another sneak preview so they don't have to rewind back. But
let me just say, here's a teaser, because I got to interview a player from the Eels past from the lower grades. And one of the reasons he was a crowd favourite was that the ground announcer used to always say, and that try was scored by Julio Pomponio. So, yes, we have an interview with Julio coming up in our Blue and Gold Alliance special feature coming up this week. So, there you go.
I'll speaking that one. That's a pretty good callback.
Speaking of the sort of the Brazilian football announcer shout out there, good to see the Matildas progressing through into the quarterfinals as well. I know it's not rugby league, but that was a good game they played against Denmark.
Well, can I just let you know too, John, that Yoko has suddenly become a big supporter of the Matildas, given the talk that's out there about a public holiday. So she's had pretty much, as a Kiwi, she's had zero interest in what's been happening with the Matildas, but her ears pricked up tonight when I let her know that there's talk of a public holiday. And I think all the support's going to go behind their next few matches.
And rightly so.
So, okay, fellas. Well, look, we've come to the end of another news episode of the Tip Sheet. Our thanks again to everyone who's tuned in to this, and all those people that give us a bit of feedback, whether it's on the TCT website, whether it's on our social media platforms, whether it's getting in touch with us and sending us messages, whatever the case may be. We appreciate you listening. We appreciate your support across all of the platforms on which it's available. Can also ask that if people are listening to this on YouTube, that you do subscribe to the YouTube channel and our YouTube channel, because it does help with all the metrics and how everything is worked out with their algorithms. So that would be great if you could do that. Have a subscribe, like the podcast. That would be fantastic if you could do that. Our thanks to our sponsors, Big Swing Golf Northmead and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. Our thanks again for the weekend with Parramatta Leagues Club hosting us, allowing us to host their post-match event in Jack's Bar and Grill. As always, it is the home of the Eels, Parramatta Leagues Club, and we appreciate being involved in making sure that it's a place for Eels supporters to gather both before and after the game. John and Clint, thank you again for another fine performance tonight. And as I always say, go you mighty Eels.